Hello and welcome to the Allplane Podcast, where we talk about commercial aviation in the company of professionals and, very importantly, with entrepreneurs and innovators that are working day and night to redefine the future of this industry. But first of all, let me reiterate my invitation to visit our website, Allplane.tv, that is Allplane.tv. There you will find more episodes of this podcast and, of course, lots of other content about commercial aviation, airlines, airports, and aerospace in general. In today's episode, we travel, well, virtually of course, to Europe's aerospace capital, Toulouse, in the south of France, because it is there that Alexandre Feray, our guest today, started Open Airlines and made it grow to what it is today, a software company servicing some 44 airlines all over the world. And what does Open Airlines do? Well, it helps airlines reduce their fuel consumption by flying better. Alexandre's company has developed some smart software that analyzes flight patterns and comes up with recommendations for pilots to fly more efficiently. The result is that less fuel is being burned, which is good for the environment, and it is good for the airline's bottom line, of course. So I asked Alexandre to explain in more detail how this technology works, and I also asked him to share his views on how can we lower the aviation industry carbon footprint, not by aiming at moonshots, but by squeezing more efficiency improvements using existing technologies. If you wish to learn more about this topic, tune in for today's episode of the podcast. Hello, bonjour, Alexandre. How are you?
Hola, I'm good, thank you.
Alexandre Feray, you pronounce it Feray?
Yeah.
Feray,
Feray.
who is the founder of Open Airlines. It's a startup company. I don't know if can we say startup, because you've been growing like crazy the last few years, but a young company based in Toulouse, in France, big hub of European aviation industry. And what Open Airlines does is basically you have developed software that helps airlines make a more efficient use of fuel. So basically to spend less fuel, to use fuel in a smarter way. Can you tell us about yourself and your company? Because you were the founder of this company just a few years ago.
Yes, thank you, Michael. I think you summarized it correctly. Indeed, today's biggest challenge for aviation is obviously COVID, but just after that, it's going to be global warming and the fight against global warming. And we're contributing to that with technology, as you said, with digital technology. I have a background in IT and a background in airline because I was working at Air France in the IT department for flight operations. I'm also very much fond of nature and mountains, and I could witness with my own eyes that every year when you go to the mountains in the summer or in the winter, glaciers are disappearing. It made me sad, and I knew also that airplanes use a lot of fuel, that an airline uses a lot of fuel. Actually, fuel is the number one cost at the airline. It represents 30% of their cost.
Yeah, sorry if I can stop you here 1 second. Obviously, if we look at the macro picture, the global warming and carbon is a big issue right now. But also, even if we don't take this into account, fuel is a huge cost. It's between 1/4 and 1/3 of the airline's expenses. So anything that can help reduce this bill a little bit, it's certainly interesting.
Exactly. There are industries where ecology and economy don't go the same way. The airline industry is an industry where ecology and economy goes the same way. As you said, it's between 20 to 30% of the cost, depending on the kind of airlines. On the low-cost airlines that have reduced all the other costs, it can be even more than 30%. So it's very important. It's also an industry that usually has very low margins. So if you can reduce your number one cost by, let's say 3%, you increase your margin by 1 point, which is already very significant. So there's lots of incentive in addition to CO2 reduction just to reduce fuel on cash, preserve cash.
So basically what your company does is you have developed a software that tells the pilots how to fly more efficiently, how to optimize the approaches, the flight path, the way that the pilot manages the aircraft, basically, so that he can reduce fuel consumption with exactly the same plane. It's not a hardware or anything that needs to be modified on the aircraft, but just making better use of the existing resources.
Exactly, yes. And you stress this point, and it's very important because there are lots of ways to reduce fuel consumption, but a lot of them, require new aircraft or changes in the aircraft, which are costly. And as you said, we don't require any change of the aircraft. What we exploit is the data of the aircraft. And you know that all the aircraft have black boxes. And actually, they are not only used for investigations, but they can be used for proactive, safety analysis. And we use that also for fuel efficiency. So we take this data with other sources of data, such as weather, air traffic control information. And by processing it, we look at ways in the things in the aircraft preparation, in the flight preparation, or in the flight execution that could be better. We look for fuel-saving best practices. So as you said, we work a lot with the pilots because at the end, it's the pilots that fly the aircraft and can make it fly more efficiently or less efficiently. So we work a lot with pilots, giving them feedbacks, but not just them, because fuel is it's a company-wide effort. There are best practices in maintenance, in what we call dispatch, which is choosing the best routes. It's people on the ground that do that, called dispatchers. So people on the ground also, or marketing even, can have an impact on fuel efficiency. So we try to have a 360-degree view on everything fuel in an airline. But it's true that we have especially worked with pilots and give them a lot of feedback through a mobile app so that they can improve their flying technique and be even more fuel efficient.
Yes, actually, I had a chance to do a podcast recently about aviation fuel with two professionals from IATA and from a Russian fuel supplier, a large fuel company. And one of the main things was that there's still lots of inefficiencies in this whole fueling process. So lots now being optimized through software and digital tools. One question I had for you here is, you gather all this data, but how does it work in practice? So because I've been checking your website and it seems you are selling this as a sort of a software as a service. What's the actual practical implementation of this? How you do it?
Yeah. Yes, you're right. We set it as a software as a service. Basically, when we sign a contract with an airline, we do some implementation work to build the data feeds between, for example, the airline flight planning system, the airline QR quick access recorders, like the little sisters of the black boxes, to feed all the data to our systems, which are on the cloud, in a secure cloud. And then the airline will use it directly from their PC, or pilots can use it from their iPad or smartphone. Every day we'll get new data from the airline on our machines in the cloud. We'll run the algorithms, look for things that can be improved, and we give them recommendations or KPIs about where they can make progress, track their progress, and recommendations. So it's based on a subscription model where basically they hand the data over to us, and then they can freely use all the recommendations on the app to make better decisions.
So this data is gathered by the airline through its own internal processes, but is not fed into the system by some sort of physical connection to the aircraft systems. So it comes from the airline headquarters, to put it another way, not from the actual aircraft that is using this system.
Yes, most of the time it comes from the airline headquarters, as you said. In some cases, some aircraft can be equipped with Wi-Fi, wireless communication, Wi-Fi and 4G, and they can dump the content of the quick access recorders directly to our servers, but it doesn't require any specific installation in the aircraft, no hardware, as you mentioned. So we are using existing, data pipes or data feed, except we had another connection to our server. So that's why it's not so complex to implement, because it's using things that are already existing, except they have been used for safety, and we are using them for a different usage, which is flight efficiency.
The data flow is two ways, because you get the data from the airline, you process it, but then you need to provide actionable recommendations for a whole set of pilots and aircraft, right? Because it's very, from what I read in your website and from what I know of your product, provides recommendations on a very detailed way. For example, each flight path might get its own set of recommendations so that the pilots can adjust their behavior or the way they handle the aircraft at each given moment during the flight.
You're right. You use the right word, actionable recommendations, because indeed, if software gathers data and just displays the data, it's not going to do any good. So we provide actionable recommendations, things the airline can change in the way they choose their routes, for example, in the way they prepare the aircraft, for example, by washing the engines with high pressure washing machines at a better frequency. And more importantly, recommendations for pilots. So they have a mobile app that we call My Fuel Coach, and it really acts as a coach that gives them insights on how to be more efficient in terms of flying green. And they have a briefing with information when they fly a new route. They will have information on this route, what are the preferred paths, what kind of fuel-saving best practices they can expect to be able to do on this route, what others people have managed to do, and so that they can prepare their flight with fuel efficiency in their mind. And at the end of the flight, they also have a debrief, just like, I don't know if you use apps like Strava, or when you jog, you have debrief on how well you jogged or how well you cycled, where you did good. And so it gives you a debrief that tells you, what you did that was good, encouraging you, rewarding you for how many kilograms of fuel you saved, and where also you could have done better, conditions permitting, because we remain very humble, but where we think you could have done better, the pilot can see his flight in 3D with fuel added information. So it's very interesting for him or her, and then it gives them a lot of insight on how they could become more fuel efficient pilots.
This benchmark that you are measuring with, is it for each specific airline, or you pull data from all your different airlines and then you have a sort of an industry benchmark that the pilots can measure against?
So we pay very attention to the property of data and data confidentiality. We consider the data is the airlines. So by default, we don't share data with anybody else. But for airlines that are willing to participate in a inter-airlines benchmark, I would say, and a lot are very interested, then they can compare their performance for benchmarks. For example, they can see whether they manage to perform a lot of CDA, which are continuous descent approach, fast safe fuel at a given airport compared to another airline. And this allows them to know whether constraints comes from the airport or from the controller, or it's more their culture that they need to improve. So it can be very interesting for them, but it's only on a voluntary basis, because by default, data is theirs. We don't share it with anybody.
Okay. Yes, you touch what was going to be actually one of my next questions is there's all this traffic control aspect here. How much scope is there for specific pilot to optimize inside the limitations imposed by air traffic control?
You're right. The term control means that you are under a controlled environment when you fly, which means you have constraints, and obviously, it's good for safety. You cannot just do whatever you want. So it's true that it imposes some constraints on what pilots can do and what cannot do, but still there is, a little bit of freedom or possibility to negotiate things with the air traffic control, and that's where there's an opportunity for improvement. Also, the airlines use the tool to engage discussions with air traffic control. We have seen cases in Iceland or in Dubai where the airlines could come with the data from Skybrave, showing to the air traffic controllers that the path they were giving were not as efficient as they could be. They could give numbers on the numbers of kilograms it cost, CO2, And these are things that controllers were not fully aware of. And then they could find a path to improve the approaches. So it benefited these airlines. It benefited all the other airlines that fly to the same airport, and obviously to to the planet also.
Mm-hmm. Because obviously there's a lot of attention being placed now on the new propulsion technologies, and actually we had here in this podcast recently quite a few of the pioneers that are now working on these type of projects. But actually there might be still quite a lot of maybe some scope to optimize based on things like the flight corridors, stuff like that. I'm not an expert in this specific segment of the industry, but in your opinion, how much can this optimization contribute to this, carbon reduction?
Yes, actually, it is estimated that fuel-saving best practices in the hands of the airline, better maintenance, green operating procedures, all together can contribute, up to 10% maybe in terms of reduction of fuel consumption, which is significant because it's almost like a new generation of aircraft. And on the air traffic management side, the same numbers is usually used, around 10%. And there was a publication very recently by Eurocontrol, and it's their own number that says, yes, they could have an improvement about 8 to 12%, if I remember correctly, by improving the routes, by improve corridors or giving better clearance. So combined together, it's 20%. So it's very significant, and this can be done with probably less investments than the hydrogen aircraft or electrical aircraft that we probably need to become carbon neutral. But in the shorter time, I think we can reach this 10 plus 10% of fuel saving.
And this is because of technology constraints? Is it because of government constraints? I think there's also space reserved to military activities as well and stuff like that. So what are the obstacles?
Yeah, it's true. There are many obstacles. Some are for example, due to military airspace, but a lot of obstacles come from, I would say, outdated technology or outdated processes. First of all, the airspace is very fragmented, even in Europe, where we start to have a better cooperation. The Spanish airspace is optimized this way, the French airspace is optimized another way, the German airspace. So if you fly from Madrid to Berlin, then you have basically inefficiencies at every border. The other thing is the technology that is used for air traffic control is very, very old. Actually, it dates from post-war technologies with beacons on the ground that give radio information. But today, we are using GPS and we have other ways to localize the aircraft. The thing is, we need to upgrade all the aircraft. We need to remain compatible with the old ones. And the other thing is, I think that's one of the issue with aviation. It's safety first. The motto everywhere you will go in an airline is safety first, which is very, very good. And it's the safest means of transportation. But one problem with that is that innovation is much slower because, what is known, what has been working for years is safe. So the pace of introducing innovation is sometimes constrained by this. And so like the computing power in an aircraft, you could think the computer in the aircraft flies the aircraft by itself, but actually it has a very, very old processor, very little memory. That's why, tools like ours on a laptop can offer much better optimization.
Tell me about Open Airlines. So you started this company in Toulouse. That was when, like 5 years ago, something like that?
Actually, it was a little more than 10 years ago.
Okay.
Yes, I created the company in Toulouse to help the airline optimize their operations with digital technologies.
Uh-huh.
Very quickly, we focused on fuel efficiency and environment because we thought, as you said, economically, it made a lot of sense because fuel is number one cost at the airline. And we thought also, and it was 10 years ago, that there would be expectation from the society to be more carbon neutral. So the two combined, would create an interesting business case for us. And I had the sense also what with new technology and with things that we now call big data. We didn't call it like that, or AI. We could deliver solutions. So that was the original ideas. And it started, our technology started with a European research project called Clean Sky about 10 years ago, where we worked with labs, with ENAC, the National Aeronautics Schools in Toulouse, with airlines and with pilots. And that's where we could get our hands on the data and run our algorithms and give them results that were promising. And based on that, we continued investing. It was a lot of work because it took almost 4 years from the start of the R&D and having a first a product on the marketplace. But we kept working on that, and I think we were right because since then we have met the market success.
Mm-hmm. Are you privately funded? Have you received venture capital?
Yes, we were very underfunded, privately funded. Basically, I started the company by myself with only 20,000 euros. So, and for a few years we struggled with that, selling services to get some money, and we also had some subsidies with European research projects. And after some times, when we started getting traction from the market, we went to see venture capitalists, and we raised capital investment in 2015, first 1 million euro with a very interesting investment fund, which is called Alter Equity. It's based in Paris, but it's one of the pioneers in France and in Europe, probably, of what we call impact investing. They invest only in companies that have a positive impact on the planet or people. So we were very interested in that aspect. So we invested 1 million euro in 2015, and we had another round in 2018 with them and the French Public Bank of Investment of another 1 million euros to accelerate and develop new products in 2018.
And you now have, according to your website, you have 40 plus airlines, 44 airlines, something like that, using your software.
Exactly. We have 44 airlines now using the software. Some of them are being implemented. I think 40 are using the software, and about 4 are being implemented today. So it's a good number. We're quite proud of that. And also what's interesting is that we have airlines of all kinds of business models. We have flag carriers like Air France. We have low-cost carriers like Volotea in Spain, and freight carriers or regional airlines. And we also have airlines all over the world. USA, Argentina, Western Europe, Eastern Europe, Africa, Middle East, Asia. So that's very interesting, to see that it's kind of universal.
Well, they all have the same problem with the fuel.
Exactly. For all these airlines, it's still their number one cost, or almost always their number one cost.
How many people working now at Open Airlines?
We are 38 people. Now, most of them are in Toulouse, but we also have 2 subsidiaries, one in the USA and one in Asia. So we have, 1 person in America and 3 persons in Asia.
And your flagship product is the one called Sky Breathe, right? You have a suite of products. The core product is Sky Breathe, is this system to process the fuel data and get some improvements there. What about the other ones? I think you have also some real-time analysis tools for the pilots in the cabin. What can you tell us about your suite of products?
Yes, exactly. You said our core product, our flagship product is Sky Breathe. That's where we have invested a lot and developed the company. And more recently, we have tried to diversify it and create a suite of products, or portfolio of products. So another one is what we call Sky Breathe on board. Because Sky Breathe, the flagship product, processes the data after the flight. It's used before the flight for briefing, after the flight for debriefing, but it doesn't give real-time information during the flight. So more recently, we have developed Sky Breathe on board, which is a brother product or sister product that can be used during the flight. On modern aircraft, there is connectivity between the avionics and a tablet where you can get in real time the parameters from the aircraft, the position, fuel flow, etc. And we run our algorithms directly on the laptop and tablet to give to provide assistance to a pilot to execute fuel saving best practices. And the idea is to be very little intrusive because there's lots of workload in the cockpit. So have the parameters, have intelligence in the algorithms to tell the pilot, hey, in 5 minutes, there is an opportunity for you to do a given maneuver that can save fuel. It's always the pilot that decides and that does, the maneuver. It doesn't, pilot the aircraft itself, but it gives insight to the pilots in real time, considering conditions, weather, etc.
And it requires to be connected to the aircraft system. So it's physically plugged into the aircraft, or it gets it through some sort of wireless link.
So there are different options depending on what the airline has. It can be connected to the aircraft through what we call an aircraft interface device. So we'll get the parameters from the aircraft through this interface. It can be an interface where we plug the PC or laptop to this interface, or it can be a wireless communication between the PC and laptop on this interface. If the airline doesn't have this interface for older generation aircraft, it can still run autonomously, for example, using the GPS position of the device. If they have connectivity, air-ground connectivity, more and more they have, internet on board, it can do additional computations or get, updates, weather updates, or this kind of thing. So depending on what the airline has, it's a more complete or more degraded solution. But even in a degraded solution, it can really give useful insight to the pilot that will make the flight more efficient.
You also have a couple more products, right? Apart from Skybreeze. Skybreeze, sorry, I must say, it's, in case people search it when hearing it, is ending with an E. So Sky Breathe, like a breathe, but ending with an E. I want to put it in the show notes anyway, so that people can check the website. So what else? You have Skybreeze on board.
You're right. We have, so these are the flagship products. We have also a product that is using basically the same data as Skybreeze plus some additional data to deal with on-time performance. It's called OCC Intelligence. OCC stands for Operations Control Center. So we analyze, delays and reasons for delays for operational performance. And we have been developing and putting on the market a new product called Skybreeze APM for aircraft performance monitoring. What it does is that it looks at a lot of parameters from the data to see how the aircraft performance is evolving or degrading in time. As an aircraft flies, as an engine runs, its performance is degrading a little bit, percentage by percentage. And we monitor that so that the airline can know the actual performance of their aircraft compared to the original performance, and adjust the flight planning, or maybe take proactive actions to solve the maintenance issues. So that's a new product. And the last one that is under development is Skybreeze for ATM, air traffic management. We saw, that our airlines were using the Skybreeze data to discuss with the air traffic controllers to sometimes influence the design of the approaches. The idea is that the air service navigation providers could use it themselves to design the approaches, from the beginning, with not only safety in mind, that they already do, not only noise in mind, which they already do, but also with greenhouse gas emissions in mind, which is something they understand, not as well, I would say.
Do you claim on your website that reductions in fuel consumption normally are between 2 and 5%?
Yes, that's what we claim, and that's what we witness, 2 to 5% on the total fuel consumption from the airline, just with a Skybreeze product. We hope that with Skybreeze on board, we can add another 2 to 5%. And it's something we've witnessed. You mentioned Volotea. They have published in a presentation that indeed they had an improvement of around 3% by using Skybreeze on the Airbus fleet. Or Norwegian, in their presentation to investors last year, they said that they had reached, or were counting on 2%, which represented 27 million euros. So, we started with ecology and CO2, but you were right to mention, there's hard euros or hard dollars behind that.
Indeed. And does it have the same effect through all stages of the flight, or that's particularly effective in takeoff and landing where there's some more maneuvering?
Well, you're right. Actually, I think we do have more effect on takeoff and landing. These are the phases where there is more room for optimization and more maneuvering, as you said. You can, decide on the acceleration altitude. You can decide on the final approach path. You can do a continuous descent or traditional step descent. And all these things have an influence. So I would say we focus more on that. But the cruise phase, especially on a long haul flight, is much longer. So even though the percentage is a little less probably of what we can optimize in the cruise phase, for a long haul flight, I think it's still a very important phase to optimize. You can optimize, quantity of fuel you bring, the routes, with the winds, the altitude where you are flying. So on short haul flight, it's more takeoff, climb and descent. On long haul flight, it's more balanced.
Actually, you answered what I had here noted down as my next question, which was actually whether short haul, long haul, whether there are specific types of aircraft, wide body, narrow body. You kind of answer it.
Yes, I think all in all, we see almost the same numbers, because even though we are stronger in the takeoff, climb and descent phase, on shorter flights you have a lot of them. On long haul flights you have less of them, but you have a longer cruise. And also, aircraft that use little fuel, like turboprops, it's still 2 to 5%. It's 2 to 5% of a smaller number, but it's still about the same usually.
Now moving back into more the macro level, how you view the race to move away from fossil fuel onto other types of propulsion? There have been a lot of talk this year. Aside from COVID, of course, the other topic is fossil fuels. Do you see this transition happening in what time frame? It might happen eventually. I mean, everyone is thinking about that, but we don't know how long will it take.
Yes, you're right. I think it's there are two ways at looking at the problem. I think you can first it's a very complex problem, because it requires a lot of changes in technology to get rid of fossil fuel, because kerosene is just has wonderful properties for aviation, except for being fossil and releasing CO2. On alternative technologies, electricity, hydrogen, etc., cause lots of challenges. So you could think it can take years, and there are huge challenges. But if you look back at history, I think today or yesterday is the anniversary of the first Wright brothers flight, and it was very early in the 20th century. And 50 years later, we were flying jet engine, across the Atlantic in a few hours. 10 years later, we were, sending someone to the moon and bringing him back. So if the industry is motivated by that, put a lot of effort, I think there is hope for them to, go even quicker. And I think there's a hope with, what's happening today, the pressure from the environment and also COVID, because we've seen that the governments have helped the airline industries. In Europe, they have given, lots of money to airlines or to help the aeronautics industry. And the condition for that is to accelerate their transition to carbon neutrality. So Airbus is working very hard on the hydrogen aircraft. They are aiming for commercial flights or first real flights in 2035. So it's still 15 years. So indeed, the range is more, 15 to 25 years to really have a shift. But what's interesting, I think, is that we shouldn't accept one single solution. It will be a combination of solutions. We help with digital. ATC can do their share. We saw that hydrogen can be a solution. Biofuels or synthetic fuels can be a solution. So if everybody is looking at the problem with various solutions, there are ways to add this 10%, and at the end reduce it considerably. It's a long-term quest, and there's lots of risks.
Well, we can start by consuming less today, thanks to technology, like
exactly
the one you are developing. For people that want to know more about Open Airlines, the website, openairlines.com.
Exactly.
So I'm going to add links to the show notes, and yeah.
Yes, and we like to, publish a lot of awareness on educational content on the website. So I encourage people to go and check our blog, and they'll see, articles about our solution, but articles about, biofuels or the hydrogen aircraft. So everybody who's interested in green aviation, I think will find valuable content, and we'd be happy to have your comments and your suggestions, of course.
We'll definitely add links to this so that everyone can easily check your company, the products, and also all the content, all the good content you have in there. It's been a real pleasure. We'll definitely keep an eye on technology improvements in this area, because that's definitely something that can already be done now. Airlines can start saving fuel now. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Michael. And I'd like to, take this opportunity and also talk to your audience, because I know there are also lots of, aviation lovers, but also lots of pilots, private or public pilots. And just yesterday, we launched a new initiative called Green Pilot. It's a movement that everybody can join. If you are aviation lover or a pilot, you can join the movement and claim that you're concerned with aviation. You fill out a little survey saying you care about the environment, and then you can become a green pilot. And that's a movement that has been proposed to me by Bertrand Piccard, who is the greenest pilot on Earth, because that's the only one that managed to fly around the world with not using a single drop of fuel. So
actually, I had
movement.
2 weeks ago, I had his co-pilot, his co-team member, Andre Borcher. Yes, he was here on the podcast talking about his latest venture in Switzerland about electric flight. So,
awesome.
Indeed, yeah.
So that's great. So yeah, everybody can be a green pilot. Thank you, Michael, for this podcast and giving insight to all that aviation can do, and raise awareness and increase the passion, because it's an industry of passion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael.
And one more thing before you go. Remember, you can subscribe to the Allplane Podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and many other platforms. If you like this podcast, please do not hesitate to give it a good rating or to recommend it to a friend. See you soon.